Hey everyone, and welcome back to We're Talking About with Kaley Gray. My name is Kaley, and this is a really special month for me because I started this YouTube channel 7 years ago. So much has happened in the past 7 years, so I just want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for subscribing and sharing my content. It's always been about reaching at least one person. And I'm not lying when I say that I will have at least one person for each episode say that how it reached them and how it ministered to them and encouraged them. So that is what keeps me putting out content each month. So if you have not subscribed on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you are listening or watching, I would love to stay connected with you. All right, so on to today's episode. Have you ever struggled with finding your purpose? Have you ever mapped out your life with a precise timeline? Life rarely unfolds the way that we expect it to. Many of us make detailed plans for our future, married after college, kids by 30, maybe our dream job by 35. So most of us have created our own detailed plans only to watch God work a completely different schedule. It's natural to want to take control over our future, but there's so much peace in recognizing that God's timing is perfect, even when it doesn't always match our expectations. So think about a time when something you desperately wanted was delayed. Looking back, can you see how that delay, it prepared you, or maybe it led you to something better? God sees the entire picture of our lives, while we only see today. His delays, they're not denials, they're preparation. So when we try to force our timeline on God, we're essentially treating him like a vending machine. G number 5, that's the snack I want today. But God isn't interested in simply just giving us what we want when we want it. He's interested in giving us what we need when we need it, shaping us into the person that he has created us to be. So the beautiful truth is that God's plans for us are good, even when they unfold differently than we might have imagined. His timing accounts for the factors that we can't see, the growth that we need, the people that we're going to meet, the circumstances that must align. So trusting his timing means believing that he loves us enough to give us his best, not just what feels good in the moment. Sometimes the greatest lessons come through waiting. A friend once told me that after she got married at 23, she thought that children would come quickly for them. Instead, they faced 4 years, 10 months, and 14 days of waiting. Through fertility treatments and countless prayers, they learned a really fundamental truth, that God's not like Santa Claus, and his will doesn't always align with our immediate desires. This waiting period, it wasn't wasted time, it was preparation. But when she surrendered her timeline to God's, she discovered that his delays were actually divine appointments. They now have 2 children who eventually came, and they weren't just babies. They were miracles that arrived in God's perfect timing. So surrendering to God's will, it isn't a one-time decision. It's a daily choice. Every morning, we wake up with the opportunity to either live for ourselves or live for God's purposes. This daily surrender is where transformation happens. Not in grand gestures, but in small, consistent choices. So think about your morning routine. Do you start by checking your phone, or do you start by connecting with God? These small decisions can shape our entire day. When we begin each day by surrendering our plans, our worries, our desires to God, we position ourselves to walk in His will. Surrender, it doesn't mean becoming passive or losing our personality. It means aligning our hearts with God's heart through our spiritual disciplines like prayer, having Bible studies and fellowship. As we consistently practice these disciplines, something beautiful happens. Our desires begin to change. What we want starts to align with what God wants. This process, it requires patience within ourselves. Some days we are going to surrender completely, and there's other days we're going to struggle to let go. Anyone else have control issues? Just me? No, that's the normal part of the journey. God isn't looking for perfection. He's looking for willingness. Each day offers a fresh opportunity to choose His way over ours. And each choice builds our spiritual muscle for the next decision. Psalms 37:4, it reminds us to delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. This doesn't mean that God becomes our personal genie, but rather that as we align our hearts with His, our desires begin to match His purposes. So as we develop these spiritual disciplines, just like as we develop physical muscles through exercise, our spiritual disciplines, those must be practiced consistently as well. This includes having a regular prayer time and Bible studies, being active in your local church and serving and being involved in that community, and serving others without expecting recognition, and choosing obedience even when it's difficult. A question to ask yourself is, what specific area of my life do you need to surrender to God today? And what practical step can I take to make that surrender real? If you're struggling with finding your purpose, that's not necessarily a bad sign. Often, struggle indicates you're exactly where you need to be. And the enemy, he wants you to quit just before your breakthrough. In Romans 8:28, it reminds us that all things work together for the good for those who love God and are called according to His purpose. So when life gets difficult, our first instinct is often to assume we're off track. We think struggle means we've made a wrong turn or that God has abandoned us. But what if the struggle actually indicates we're exactly where God needs us to be? Think about a butterfly struggling to emerge from its cocoon. That struggle, it isn't a sign of failure. It's necessary for developing the strength to fly. Our spiritual walk struggles often indicate that God is developing something in us that we're going to need for what's ahead. So when you're facing challenges, instead of immediately looking for an escape route, ask God what He might be teaching you. Are you developing patience? Are you learning to depend on Him? Growing in compassion for others who struggle? Sometimes our greatest growth happens not in the easy seasons, but in the difficult ones. The enemy loves to whisper that struggle and thinking that you should quit. He wants you to believe that if following God were right, it would be easy. But that's not how spiritual growth works. Just like our physical muscles grow through resistance, our spiritual muscles grow through challenges. Your struggle, it might be the very thing that is preparing you for the breakthrough that's just around the corner. So don't let difficulty convince you to abandon God's plan for your life. Instead, let it drive you deeper into dependence in Him. One common lie is that some purposes are more valuable than others. So, whether you're impacting one person or thousands, every act of obedience matters to God. D.L. Moody once said, "Many people are willing to do great things for God, but very few are willing to do small things for God." So, ministry, it doesn't require a stage or a platform. Every grocery store visit, soccer game, birthday party that you go to, it's an opportunity to be God's light. Whether it's praying with a struggling friend or showing consistent kindness to a difficult coworker, we're called to love the people that God places in our paths. We live in this culture that is obsessed with, the big, flashy achievements. Social media, it celebrates the grand gestures, the viral moments, the massive successes. But God operates differently. He sees the small acts of obedience as just as valuable as the large ones. So maybe you're not called to preach to thousands, but you know what? You can encourage your coworker who's having a tough day. And, you might not write the best-selling book, but you can text a friend who's struggling. You might not lead this massive ministry, but you can serve faithfully in your local church. These aren't consolation prizes. They're exactly what God has called you to do, because every act of obedience matters to God, regardless of how many people notice. The single mom who prays over her children every night is just as important in God's kingdom as the famous evangelist. And the person who quietly serves in the church nursery is just as valuable as the worship leader on stage. God doesn't measure our success the way the world does. He looks at the heart, the faithfulness, the love behind our actions. When we serve with pure motives, even the smallest acts become powerful tools in God's hands. Your sphere of influence, it might seem small, but to God, it's exactly the right size for the purpose that He has for you. So don't despise small beginnings or opportunities that seem insignificant, because God specializes in using ordinary people doing ordinary things to accomplish extraordinary purposes. So what are some practical steps that can guide us through the process? Well, you need to listen. The Holy Spirit, He rarely shows us the entire path at once. Instead, He reveals the next step. So be sensitive to His voice and trust that He will connect all of the dots in your life. Looking back, you'll see His hand guiding you through every decision. Stay connected in community. The local church provides the best community and accountability. Surround yourself with people who are going to encourage your faith and challenge you to grow. The people around you make all the difference. And maintain a life of prayer. Prayer is our vehicle for transformation. The more we talk with God, the easier it becomes to recognize His voice and to respond to His leadings. Think of prayer as talking to your best friend. The more time that I spend with that friend, the closer we become. And it is easier to recognize each other's voices the more time we spend together. Life rarely unfolds the way that we expect. And God rarely shows us the complete picture up front. Instead, He reveals our path one step at a time. asking us to trust Him for the journey. This can feel frustrating when we want to see the whole plan, but there's wisdom in God's approach. So imagine if God showed you everything that you would face in the next 10 years, every challenge, every loss, every difficult season, would you have the courage to move forward? Probably not, because God reveals our path gradually because He knows we can only handle so much at once. His step-by-step guidance, it protects us while building our faith. When you're walking in darkness with only a flashlight and you can't see the entire path, but you can see enough to take that next step in front of you. That's how God leads us. He gives us enough light for the next step, and as we take in faith, He illuminates the step after that. So this process, it requires us to develop a spiritual muscle that we might not otherwise build. Trust, patience, and dependence on God. So each time we obey without seeing the full picture, we grow stronger in faith. And each time we choose to trust God's character when we can't see His plan, we become more like Jesus. So remember, God's ultimate goal, it isn't to get us to a destination. It's to transform us along the way. So trust the process, even when you can't see the outcome. The quicker you respond to God's promptings in your life, the easier it becomes to walk in obedience. So whether He's asking you to pray for a stranger or make a difficult decision, immediate obedience builds spiritual muscle. And you may experience disappointment along the way, but you won't be disappointed in the end. Because when you trust the one who made everything and knows exactly what you need, it's going to be worth it in the end. So this month, challenge yourself to see what current circumstances you have, whether they're struggles or successes, as part of God's process in developing your purpose. So instead of focusing on what you think what should be happening, ask God, show me what it is that you want and make sure I'm in the right place today. Because remember, God will connect all of the dots of your life. Your job is to simply take the next step He shows you, trusting that His plan is better than anything that you could imagine for yourself. So trust the process of purpose. Be sure to comment below if this episode has encouraged you, and take time to ask God what areas you need to surrender to Him. And I will see you guys next time. Bye.